So Epicureanism is another enriching philosophy that you can study. As you read Epicurus' primary sources, this video may help you better understand, evaluate, and apply them. The first theme of Epicureanism is hedonism. So he was a hedonist. This means he believed that pleasure is the only intrinsic good. We should seek that which will bring long-term pleasure. Now, the modern mind often misunderstands what he meant by pleasure. Epicurean pleasure is not titillation. It's a deep, abiding, tranquil, and peaceful state of being. It's a peaceful state of mind that's free from anxiety, fear, and other problems in the soul. According to Epicurus, experiencing this peaceful state is the meaning of life. Now, as you read, you'll see that he defines pleasure as the absence of pain. So he wrote the following: "Pleasure is the absence of pain in the body and trouble in the soul. It's not an unbroken succession of drinking bouts and revelry, not sexual lust, not the enjoyment of fish and other delicacies of luxurious table. None of that produces the pleasant life. Rather, pleasure arises through sober reasoning, searching out the grounds of choice and avoidance, and banishing those beliefs that lead to tumult in the soul." So the modern mind often misunderstands what he meant by pleasure. Pleasure as the absence or removal of pain. To better understand his idea of pleasure, consider the following. Instead of adding things to your life to achieve pleasure and happiness, imagine subtracting them away. For example, you may have great anxiety right now. Imagine that anxiety just dropping away. That's better than any drug you can take to feel pleasure. Now imagine you feel the need to succeed in the eyes of other people. Imagine that just dropping away. Such relief. The burden's off your back. You can see the Office Space movie for a humorous depiction of this, right? Now imagine you're a perfectionist. Imagine that just dissolving away so you become free from that tension and compulsion. Such relief, right? Imagine you're suffering from PTSD or some other disorder. Suddenly, for some reason, you have an insight or something happens to you so that you feel yourself and you feel reality for the first time. This removal of suffering in the mind, in the soul, in the emotions, this removal of suffering is what Epicurus was talking about. It's bliss. It's what he meant by pleasure. Imagine this too. Imagine a very loving and intelligent person walks into the room and begins talking to you, enjoying your presence. When that happens, some sort of suffering drops and you experience the state that Epicurus spoke of. And as we'll see later, Epicurus believed that good friends, good relationships can bring us into this state of being, this state of pleasure, this dropping away, this ataraxia, repose. So Epicurus was seeking pleasure, but not in the way that most modern people think. He was not seeking a dopamine release in the brain or physical pleasures alone. He didn't believe this pleasure arose by fulfilling many desires or engaging in orgies. No, the pleasure arises when anxiety, perfectionism, fear, guilt, addictions, compulsions, loneliness, and other forms of suffering drop away. And they often drop away in the presence of a loving person, a friend. Right? Now, repose, ataraxia, tranquility, and peace, these better capture his idea of pleasure. It's a dropping away of all that clouds the mind, emotions, and soul. So let's do some discussion questions, right? If we define pleasure as only the removal of pain, is death good since it's the removal of pain, the ultimate removal of pain? How can we clarify Epicurus' definition to avoid this? Now, I think one answer here is no, the removal of suffering does not result in death, but in a clear mind and body. Okay. Discussion 2. Can you be mistaken about being happy? And one answer is, yeah, it seems like you can. For example, a woman remembers an abusive relationship from the past, and she says, "Oh, I thought I was happy back then, but now I know I was not happy. I was mistaken. That wasn't love and that wasn't happiness." It's not simply that you can be mistaken about what makes you happy, but you can be mistaken about being in a state of happiness. And so this causes us to look more closely at the different notions of subjectivity and happiness. All right, discussion 3. Imagine a really good psychologist who has counseled thousands of people over a 50-year period says that she has noticed common patterns in happy people and common patterns in unhappy and unsuccessful people. Would you believe her? Well, I think most people would, and they would be quite interested in learning more about these so-called universal requirements for happiness or well-being or flourishing. And while it's true that maybe different things make different people happy, there's also commonalities. So if this psychologist and Epicurus are correct, there are some common requirements for well-being, for flourishing, and for happiness. And that's a great reason to study Epicurus. So in part 2 of Epicureanism, I'll go through the other themes, which involve his view of justice and morality, his views on fame, on materialistic possessions, on food, on silent time for reflection, the Tetrapharmacus, friends, and more. And then we'll get into the criticisms. One very interesting part of his philosophy is his metaphysics. And it might interest you to know that he did believe in the gods, according to the primary sources, but the gods are made of atoms and subject to the laws of atoms and the void. And so they're not really the type of gods that we would think of today, the monotheistic idea of God. But that's in the next video. See you there. Thanks.